taxes, go up commensurate with that, and it's a boon to the city, to the land transfer taxes we know, which was something brought in by the former mayor, David Miller, who's here for another reason, but we'll get around to asking about that here in a moment. Good to have you back in the studio. What you been up to?
Thanks, Sean. Well, lots of stuff. My kids are in university, so it's an exciting stage of life. I'm trying to get fit, as we'll get to in a minute. And I've been running the World Wildlife Fund Canada for the past 3 years. We're trying to make a difference to the environment in a way that works for people as well, because we think if people like the solutions, they're going to be the greatest advocates. So it's interesting and rewarding for me.
Now, in your day, we established, didn't Toronto have an office, I guess, in London of sorts, an environmental concern?
What happened was we were named to chair an international organization that had an office in London, and when you're the chair, you're obliged to pay some of the costs.
I see.
So it wasn't a Toronto office, it was the office of the C40, which is the 40 largest cities in the world. We chaired it between London and New York City, so it went from Mayor Livingston to me to Mayor Bloomberg.
Okay, I was going to say, because I know you were the head for a while, but is that no longer in?
Oh, I'm actually still very involved with the C40,
okay.
But you've got to be an active mayor. So my role, for example, I chaired the judging panel last year, at the end in December, for what cities are doing environmentally. There was a series of awards. There's some amazing stuff happening around the world, actually, and Toronto can be proud that we've played a big part in that movement.
All right, and so what was it that you attracted you to the environmental aspect of things here as the mayor, but now after public office?
I think it really started when I was a boy. We came to Canada in 1967. And I was from England, and I was used to English things like soccer and cricket, and back then that was very hard to find your place. Everything was hockey. It's a great game, but it wasn't the one I came from. And I really first started to feel Canadian when I went on a canoe trip in Algonquin Park in the fall of 1972. It was fantastic. Started out incredibly beautiful, and then it rained. And then it snowed. And of course, we were 14-year-old kids, so we'd forgotten to bring rain gear. And it was really tough, but it was a formative experience for me. So I've really cared, particularly about the health of Canada's fresh water, ever since then.
All right, so you carried that into public office. There was also, I think, an initiative, pardon me if it's my ignorance, that it may still be in effect, green roofs in Toronto?
Yep. Yeah, there were lots. We did all sorts of things. We probably led the green roof movement. I wouldn't personally take credit for that, but because it predated my time, but we expanded it, and that matters because if you keep the roofs green, it lowers the temperature of the city in the summer. So that lowers your need for air conditioning, so it has a positive environmental impact there. It also absorbs the water. And one of the big issues for cities today, because of climate change, there's more storms and they're worse. So the people are having to rebuild their water infrastructure. It's massively expensive. So if you can keep water from having to go into the sewer in this big rush in the middle of a storm, it really saves you a huge amount of money. So that's one of the initiatives. Lots of other things. We right-size the city vehicle fleet and used green vehicles as well. Right sizing means, if somebody doesn't need a car, put them on a bike. If they need a car instead of a truck, give them a car instead of a truck. Saves you some money, saves on greenhouse gases. Huge expansions to the CTC, bought lots of buses, new subway cars, all of that stuff. It was all around making the city a better place to live, but also giving it good environmental values and social values as well.
With former Mayor David Miller. So let me ask you, how do you feel about road tolls? John Tory's proposal here, you think that's a good initiative?
It's interesting to be asked to comment on that, given our history on the issue, because John made quite a fuss about it when I said, if we couldn't get federal or provincial money for transit, which we ended up negotiating, you might have to think about tolls. I think tolls work in the City of London really well. They call it a congestion charge, but it's really a toll. But it works in London because they used a lot of the money to invest in public transit, and they've got an amazing public transit system from everywhere in the city. In Toronto, there's lots of parts of the city that still don't have rapid transit, which is why we designed and got the money for and started building the Transit City network. I think once you have rapid transit, it's a different conversation with people. The Gardiner right now, there's alternatives. You can take GO, you can take the subway. The Don Valley, if you're coming from Northeast Scarborough, there's not a lot of transit alternatives. So I think it's a little bit unfair. Past that, I don't really want to comment too much on what my successor is doing. But that's the way I would think about it. Is there rapid transit to those neighborhoods? Do people have an alternative, or is it just another charge? And I think if people have an alternative, you can look at it one way and be more supportive. If they don't, I'm not sure you'd want to necessarily be supportive.
Something else I mean to ask you about here before we find out exactly what you're doing with this initiative of the World Wildlife Fund. It's coming up on April 8th to 9th at the CN Tower. You know, we were talking about the property values in Toronto going through the roof. It's insane. But there was a piece in the Torontoist, I was just reading this today, where they say the property taxes in the city are too low, can't meet the requirements, and if everybody's going to have an honest conversation about it, they should go up substantially. You agree with that?
I think, first of all, the relationship between property values and property taxes is a complicated one. Mm-hmm. The city gets money from the land transfer tax when property's sold. And obviously, if it's sold for more, there's going to be more money coming in for the land transfer tax. Normal property taxes, by law, you have to collect exactly the same amount each year unless you increase it. Mm-hmm. I do think, Toronto housing is amazingly expensive, and it's pricing people out of this city. And we have to be really, really cognizant of that. You've got to be able to afford to live in Toronto no matter what your kind of job. And so, we brought in some initiatives about seniors, for example, being able to get a break on property taxes. I think you have to think that kind of stuff through. It is true that Toronto's taxes are lower than the 905. That's true. For me, we were always cautious. Yes, we raised property taxes, and I think we raised them fairly. But it's a whole complicated field, and the biggest issue for me is the city is too reliant on property taxes. It actually needs revenues from other kinds of taxes.
Revenue tools.
Like sales taxes, And okay. We argued very strongly when I was mayor that we should get 1 cent of the GST. That should come to cities across Canada, because that goes up with the economy. For sure. Property tax revenue doesn't. By law, and it would actually make the city work better if the revenue was diversified. I think the land transfer tax has been pretty successful in that regard.
What is it, over half
the real estate market?
$500 million a year, I think, going into city coffers now?
It's really significant. It's taken care of the city budget, really, for the past 6 years. Before
I let you go, let's find out what you're on about with the CN Tower raising funds for a healthy and thriving planet.
So we have the CN Tower climb, April 8th and 9th. It's my New Year's resolution. I used to be really fit. The last couple of years as mayor, I was running half marathons, but I hurt my knee a couple of years ago, so I've been recovering. And it's my goal this year to climb the CN Tower. It's 1,776 steps. Mm-hmm. Fantastic event. 2 days. If people go on WWF.ca, they can sign up. It's lots of fun. We only ask you to raise $100. You don't have to pay for the event. We ask you to raise $100. Families come, corporate teams come, and for the real athletes, there's actually a kind of a race Sunday morning.
Oh, jeez. Okay, well, you can exclude me from that category.
Yeah, well, me too, John. I just want to complete it, but the current record is 7 minutes and 52 seconds to go all the way up 144 stories.
Wow.
That wasn't me.
No. Well, that's a champion, regardless, but I appreciate you coming in.
It's a pleasure to be on. Keep up the good work.
I appreciate that. You miss it at all, being mayor?
No, I felt I'd done what I could for the city, and it was time to let somebody else have a shot.
Former Mayor David Miller, thank you again. And
Thanks,
that's April 8th to 9th. Then check out the website, WWF.com.